The first day of school can be tricky to plan for, and honestly, I think Spanish 2 can be even more difficult than Spanish 1 because you're not starting from scratch. You might have a mix of kids that you know, some kids that you've never met before, and your students are going to be coming in with Spanish experience, unlike Spanish 1, where for the most part, you know you're all starting from scratch, right? Most of your students have never taken Spanish before in a Spanish 1. So if you're not starting from scratch with Spanish, what do you do on the first day of Spanish 2? Let's talk about it. Hey, my name is Ashley, aka Senorita Spanish, where I provide easy-to-use resources to save you time and energy while you're lesson planning. If you're new here, I just want to make sure that you know that links to everything that I mentioned will be down in the description box below. So, Spanish 2. There's a couple of different scenarios that I kind of want to talk you through and some different things that you might do depending on those scenarios. So first off, check your roster. Are all of those students kids that you've had before? Are all of them students that you know and they know each other? If not, then I think it's really important to do some name games, some like getting to know you, icebreaker activities to build your classroom community, especially in a world language classroom where they need to be comfortable making mistakes. They need to be comfortable working with each other like that. I know in some settings it's entirely possible that Spanish 2 classes are full of students who have been with each other for years, and not only do they know each other's names, they probably know like favorite colors, the sports they play, maybe they even know their cousins' names, all sorts of things like that. And if that's the case, obviously this isn't the scenario for you and you can just, skip ahead a few seconds. But if it's a mix of students who maybe don't know each other, then here's some ideas for you. First up is the ball game. This is so easy. I've shared about it before. You're going to have a ball and students are going to ask each other, for example, ¿Cómo te llamas? And then they'll toss the ball. The student who catches the ball is going to answer the question and then ask somebody else. I play it where once they've had a turn, they sit down, so that way we know who has had a turn and who hasn't had a turn, and they don't have to try and remember that. You can play the ball game with other questions too, of course. Second are name tag tents. I have shared about these for my Spanish 1 first day video. I actually really like them for Spanish 2 as well, especially if you have a lot of students and maybe your names are a little rusty over the summer. I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but I find it really helpful to just put up the name tag tents again, and they can help each other learn their names, and it can also help you learn their names. So making name tag tents is a great option. Third are all about me posters. These are a really simple kind of getting to know you sort of activity that is low stress because it's individual. But I don't know about you, I have never experienced, saying, hey students, time to color, and having them just sit in total silence, right? There's always students who are gonna kind of chatter while they're working, and that's perfect for easing back into things. So this is just an example of an all about me poster. I have a whole bunch in different styles and formats because I find it helps with student choice. I just lay out a whole bunch of options, say grab one and work on it. When they're done, we cut them out and we hang them up to make a classroom display or just, on a door or something like that. So that way they can get to know each other just by glancing at the posters. It tells them a lot about each other. So it's an easy icebreaker and get to know you thing for your new students, or maybe your not so new students, just kind of depending on your mix. Another really simple option are bulletin boards that include a student piece to them, right? I love doing bulletin boards where there's like a big banner and then little components that the students contribute to. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, I get to look at their names while they're decorating their piece, so I walk around and I look at them while they're coloring them. Two, it helps decorate the classroom because I never have it decorated by the first day of school. And three, I always laugh when I see these. Some of these are my favorite like punny kind of bulletin boards, so I'll show some examples for you while I'm talking just so you can kind of see what I mean by name bulletin boards. If your students already know each other well and there is zero need for any name reminders, let's look at some other ways you can kind of ease back into things, maybe warm up their Spanish skills a little bit after the summer months off. First option I have for you is the ball game again. Like I mentioned, you can play the ball game with literally any question. So it could be something as simple as ¿Qué hiciste el verano pasado? Or if that's too much for Spanish 2s on the first day, right? Because getting back into things, you could do something as easy as like, what's your favorite color? Or do you prefer this or that? Those kinds of questions. And you can put visual scaffolds on the board for them, of course, right? We want to ease them into things, support them, help them feel confident. Lots of different ways you can help them be successful with this. But playing the ball game is a great way to kind of warm things up and get them moving. Next up are icebreaker conversation cards. I've shared about conversation cards before. I love them because they are so chill. They're easy to just grab a pack, throw them at a group of students and say, okay, have a conversation. They will draw a card, they'll read the question, and you can either have one student answer the question and then the next student draws and answer a different question, or you can do it so a student draws, asks, answers, and everybody takes a turn answering. Either way works. Those are my favorite like time filler, fast finisher option, especially in like the first month of school where they're still kind of getting back into things. Next up are these Mi Verano posters, and these are something that are, again, another like low stress, easing back into things, scaffolded option, aka perfect for the first day of Spanish 2. So this example I have here is the most scaffolded one. It's got yo forms on it, so it says things like yo fui and yo hice and like just stuff like that, right, that they can fill in. I also have versions in English. I also have versions with questions, so they would respond to the question in Spanish, and versions with just pictures, so they can sit and color and probably chat with each other as they're getting back into things. That's something that I am totally fine with in my classroom because I love that that's building that group relationship, because I like to do a lot of group work in my classes. I like them to feel comfortable with their group members. Another option is human bingo. This is one that gets them up and moving around, and just like with the Mi Verano posters, I have lots of different versions of this. So one version has the questions on the sheet for them. Another version has the questions and the answers. This is the most scaffolded version, right? It asks a question in the to form, it gives them the answer in the yo form, and you can probably even see here there's little pictures to help support their understanding. Just, right, again, giving them lots of support, giving them lots of scaffolding. We want them to be successful. Another option, if you're like, no, I know these students are totally going to be able to handle this. This is the third option. It does not have the question. It does not have the yo form. It's just find somebody who did the thing, and the boxes all say did the thing, right? Again, there's still visual supports for them. I think that's really helpful so that they make sure they know what they're talking about. Either way, when they're all done with human bingo, I do have an extension activity for them, and it's just, right, who did they find that did the thing, and then a little space for them to write about their own break, their own experiences. If you're looking for more icebreakers and get to know you sort of activities, I just posted a video with a whole bunch more ideas. You can check that out here. Highly recommend it if you're like, I would really like to do a few of these purposefully throughout the beginning of the year. That's the video for you. Sometimes you want to combine the getting to know you with a little bit of review just to help them ease back into Spanish. And the ball game, the All About Me posters, the Mi Verano activity, the human bingo, all of those are obviously using Spanish. But I wanted to share with you a few ways to kind of ease back into the Spanish because they've had a few months off, or, you know, at least a few weeks off, depending on your school's calendar and how that all shakes out. So option 1 for your level 2 students are Cognates. You know that I love Cognates for beginners, and I talk about this a lot with 1s. So coming back to it with 2s is kind of like a security blanket in a way. Like they're like, oh yes, Cognates. I know how to use these. I know what to do with these. So good. So a Cognates roll a story is a really good way to kind of scaffold them back into some creative activities. The way a roll a story works is exactly what it sounds like. They're going to roll a die, and that will give them the different elements of the story. And in this version, all of the elements are Cognates, and I give them a very scaffolded writing sheet, right? I give them a graphic organizer, I give them a high frequency verbs like reference sheet, all sorts of things to help them. Another option with Cognates is a reading material race, and this is a great way to get back into your classroom library if you have one, or maybe you're introducing one this year. Either way works. So in the race, what you're going to do is you're going to give students a book, or you're going to give them several pages or something, and you're going to write the alphabet up on the whiteboard, or maybe use big sheets of butcher paper, and you're going to put a timer up, and you're going to say, okay, go. And the student's job is to scan through the materials and try and find as many Cognates as they can. When they find one, they'll run up to the board, put the cognate under the letter, and then they'll go back and keep looking. And you could do this by like giving each student a color, or giving groups of students colors of markers to work with if you wanted to make it like a race and a competition. Or you could just do it as like a whole class activity and say, okay, period 1 is against period 2, or just say, hey, we're racing to see how many we can find. Lots of different ways you can play with this. It's a great option to get them scanning through the material and looking for words that jump out of them as Cognates. Another option is to do this bulletin board, which I know probably doesn't look like a whole bunch of activities. Right behind me, this is my Cognates word wall, and I had to make it a little bit small because this board is a little bit small. The Cognates board comes with like 150 words, so it was tricky to fit them. But it also comes with posters that explain Cognates and remind them of like, what is this and how is this a tool that you can be used, and activity sheets to go with it. So you can print it, hang it up, leave it up all year round. Don't change it out, just leave it, okay? And then they can do the activities. Another great option that is a ton of fun but getting into their Spanish are just to use brain breaks. And I say brain breaks, and you might go, well, those are in the middle of class. They're games. You can just play the games at any point in time. So why not use a whole bunch of brain breaks as kind of a fun way to start class the first day of school? There are a ton of brain breaks you can use, and I actually have a video where I share some of my favorites and how I organize them so you can use them like during the year, because what I was finding would happen is that I would come up with some good ideas, or I would see an idea like while I was scrolling and be like, oh, I want to do that, and then I, whoosh, gone. Okay, so check out that video if you want to see more about how I organize brain breaks. But if I were to pick several brain breaks that would be like a great option for the first day, if your goal is, have fun, kind of loosen things up and use Spanish, these are what I would choose. Partes del cuerpo, which really is just I say a body part, they touch it, and you can play different games with that where they like are labeling or that sort of thing. Kind of think like Simon Says. Diez or cien, which is a counting game, as you might expect. The Days of the Week song, which is singing, right? Sometimes singing isn't a good way to ease into things, and sometimes singing is the best equalizer, because singing is kind of one of those things where it's like, and then you're like, we're doing it! So, a song. Run and Touch a Color, which is actually a game that I learned from my preschool classes coaching. So I coached gymnastics for over a decade, and I loved working with 3-year-olds, and I say run and touch a color because this is how the game goes. You say a movement, like run, hop, skip, jump, tippy-toe, quietly walk backwards, whatever, a movement, and a color. And if you wanted to, you can add a body part. So for example, your instruction might be run and touch the color red with your elbow and go, right? And every student has to run, find the color red, touch their elbow to it, and then find their way back to their desks. And then you just keep playing. And it can be kind of silly, right? That's a good option. And of course you can reduce the language used, so you could just use run every time and change up the color. You can expand the language by using different movement words, and you can expand the language by, right, adding body parts. So lots of different ways you could kind of mix this up if it feels too stale at first. Spanish yoga. Spanish yoga is another great option. There are tons of videos on YouTube for it. This would be a very calm way to ease back into your Spanish, right? Play a video, do the video. That's that brain break, and that would be a great option for a very calm day back, especially if you're anticipating that a lot of the other classes are going to be like this kind of thing on the first day, and you're like, you know what, I think my students would really appreciate a more chill class period in the hustle and bustle of back to school. And another option, if you're getting right back into things, is to teach about La Tomatina. This is super fun to teach about. Students do not believe it. Almost when you first tell it to them and you first explain what is happening, they're like, are my ears broken? Am I not understanding her? She's saying this, right? And you're like, look at the pictures, look at the visual supports, look at me showing you what they do. And they're like, really? It's kind of a fun one to teach a lesson about. It's a great way to start off the year. I have a whole bunch of resources on La Tomatina, so make sure you check out my blog post on that if that sounds like something where you're like, oh yeah, that would be kind of a fun way to start Spanish too. So I'll make sure to link to that down in the description box below if you want to check that out. Okay, that's everything that I have for you on your first day with Spanish 2. I know it was a lot of options, but everybody's Spanish 2 is a little bit different. Whether you know all your students, you don't know all your students, or you have a mix. So I wanted to give you a few different possibilities. If you're looking for more resources to help you at the end of the year, make sure you check out my video here on classroom policies and procedures, because we know how important those are at the beginning of the year. And if you have a lesson that you're like, this is how I start the year with Spanish 2s every single time, I love it, it's my tried and true, share about it down in the comments below. I would so love to hear about it, and I'm sure everybody else who sees this video would like to hear about it too. That's the nice thing about YouTube, with the comment section is a great way to share practices with each other. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.